The Democratic Party didn't lose this election because they didn't fundraise well enough. They didn't lose it because they didn't organize well enough. They didn't lose it because they didn't have enough exposure. They didn't lose it because they weren't running against the right person. They got their dream opponent. The Democratic Party lost this election because not just their message, but their overall brand just failed to hit home with the national electorate. And the reasons that the Democratic Party brand fell short with the American electorate, I think, are actually pretty easy to see. The answer actually lies largely in the way that many prominent Democrats have responded to Tuesday's loss. I'm not going to include every Democrat here because I think some Democrats have shown the proper response. But there's an overwhelming number of Democrats at every level who have fallen back on this one core message that I think is so destructive. And that is, we didn't fail, the voters failed us. That the American electorate is racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, and on top of all of that, they are too stupid to vote correctly. This message has been everywhere along Democratic TikTok, even in Democratic media. Even Jamie Harrison himself, the chairman of the Democratic Party, echoed some small parts of this sentiment. This message is so destructive and poisonous because not only is it just not true. If you lose an election, you lost the election. That's a basic rule across politics. It doesn't matter whether you think the electorate wasn't ready for you or not. If you lose an election, it's on you. The problem is it also makes you look incredibly insincere because you pander to these voters when you need their vote, and then as soon as they reject you, you say what you really think about them. Now, a strong emotional reaction when you've just lost a hard-fought election can be understood. You're going to have some pretty strong emotions and some initial hot takes that maybe are not that well thought out. What makes this one so poisonous, though, is because the voters are watching this. They're listening to this. Not only voters who might have gone both ways but decided to vote for Trump and are open to voting for Democrats down the road and are completely turned off by this sort of messaging, but also by the millions of Americans that didn't vote in this election who have voted in other elections that might be at some point convinced to vote again, and they hear this message loud and clear. This message is just dripping with elitism, and it is showing how out of touch many parts of the Democratic Party leadership are with the everyday American electorate. Now, I'm not going to rope in all Democrats here because down ballot Democrats are far better at messaging to your average everyday voter. There's a reason why Democrats are doing way better in House elections than they did at the Senate or presidential level in this election. There's a reason why Democrats have done so well in special elections for state legislator seats or congressional seats across the country over the last few years. It's because there are elements of the Democratic Party that knows how to speak to these voters, treat them with respect, and communicate with them very well. But the leadership, the national leadership of the party is way too DC-centric, it's way too elitist, and it's way too centered on this idea that they know better than everybody else. And voters pick up on this. They pick up on the fact that 5 minutes ago you were telling them how great they were begging for their vote, and now you're telling them how stupid and racist they are. They pick up on the fact that like 2 weeks ago you were so offended that a comedian told an anti-Hispanic joke, and now you're out there saying that Hispanics are racist and sexist because they didn't vote for Kamala Harris. The Democratic Party at its top levels has a massive elitism problem, and they need to address that. If you look at the exit polling, one of the only areas where Harris improved over the 2020 numbers was among wealthy white people. Pretty much everywhere else, Democrats fell off significantly. Now, the funny thing is, this is the exact same thing that happened to the Republican Party back in 2015, and it's what originally led to the rise of Donald Trump from within the Republican Party. You see, the Republican Party of 2015 the leadership was also filled with just these arrogant, dripping elitists that thought they knew better than the grassroots activists at the lower levels, and they would pander to them when they needed their support, but then behind closed doors, they would just trash these people. And this laid the groundwork for someone like Trump to come in and speak directly to these grassroots voters, make them feel heard and respected, and they, as quick as they could, overthrew that elitist leadership. The future of the Democratic Party, really the future of both parties, lies in individuals who are outside of DC. This isn't just to win back those like moderate, middle-of-the-road independent voters either. This is across the board. Less DC-centric people have just more mass appeal to people. This is why so many progressives were so refreshed when Tim Walz joined the ticket, because he brought an authenticity and a sort of everyday man appeal to the ticket that Kamala Harris, being a DC insider, just didn't bring. This is why people like Gretchen Whitmer or Josh Shapiro are going to be so good for the Democratic Party moving forward, because they have that just everyday humble appeal to real world voters. That's also why people like Pete Buttigieg are not a good choice for the Democratic Party going forward, because although Buttigieg is incredibly smart and well spoken, he also has a touch of elitism to him. And when he talks about issues, he tends to talk down to people. And that's not going to resonate with the majority of your everyday working class voters. I know this is a hot take and people are going to disregard this. Go ahead. But insulting the electorate and saying they're stupid, saying you're better than them is the best way to make sure you keep losing elections.